Good evening, and thank you all for coming. I just thought I'll give you a brief of what this project is before I have the pleasure of inviting Raina Saab onto the stage. In 2020, early 2020, I started looking at the Edicts of Ashoka. And as I started reading them, and the trigger for reading them was a very dear friend of mine, Gopal Krishna Gandhi, who suggested that I read them. This was when we were having debates and arguments on certain things. And I just felt that there was something in the edicts that was as important for us to ponder about. It doesn't mean the edicts are some perfect objects of a creation by a perfect king. But the conversations that the edicts trigger, whether it is about ethicality of public life, private life, coexistence, contradictions, conflicts. These are all issues I think we are all grappling with today. Everybody is grappling with, not just the other person. We are all grappling with it. And that was my trigger to start looking at them. That's one part of the conversation. The second is, I'm a musician. When I see text, I'm like, can I sing it? It's like a reflex action that unfortunately we can't stop. But I realized that I knew nothing about the language, which was Magad and Prakrit. I didn't know anything about how it sounded. And first of all, let's remember that this was probably not written to be sung. It was written to be read. So can you sing it? That's also an aesthetic question. The reason I'm bringing this up is it's also a fact that, all political progressiveness need not always transfer to aesthetic beauty. And there is always there's a very, very, contested aspect over there. How does one transfer an idea into something that's an art object? I'm an artist. Can you? Sometimes it may not work. At that point, you step back and say, no, this doesn't work. That's it. So it was first the question of whether it is possible. I was lucky to have Professor Naresh Kirti, and initially a Buddhist monk, Dhammika, who also helped me in choosing the initial edicts. I had Professor Naresh send me the edicts recited, and I just listened to them for months. The reason is I didn't know how to sing Prakrit, Magadhan Prakrit. This is another thing I want to talk about. I've spoken about it many times, but it's important, is a language undergoes a very interesting transformation when it's part of music. And it depends on what kind of music. The same language will undergo a different kind of a transformation if the form of music changes. So how do I sing the sounds of Prakrit within the ragas that I know? So it took me many months, and we created the first set. That was the trigger to what became a larger project in collaboration with Ashoka University and with an incredible scholar who we have here with us, Professor Nayanjot. Lahiri, thank you so much for coming all the way for this event. We expanded the project to say, can we build on this and create many more compositions or many more contexts for conversations? So the project is today envisioned in this manner. After the first set, the second set, which was on memory, was released a few months ago. And we wanted also a contemporary interpretation of those edicts. Contemporary with the imagination of artists in their own construct, in their own view of society, of place, location, in every manner. And we do hope that as we go forward, we'll have artists from the Northeast, artists from the South, artists from the West to also contribute to this. So what you're going to watch now, first, is a theatrical imagination, reimagination, interpretation, you can call it what you want, Raina Saab will explain, of Ashoka and memory. What does Ashoka remember? The edicts are there. The trigger is here. What doesn't he remember? What does he choose to forget? What does he remember how? What does he want to tell you? And this entire palette of questions is reimagined in the context of Kashmir, in the context of today, by the incredible theatre director, Raina Saab, and I'll call Mr. M K Raina onto the stage now to give you a brief of what you're going to first witness as a theatrical presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. Friends, I don't know where to start it because I was involved in the project by Krishna at some stage, and I knew nothing about these edicts. What we knew there were edicts, but not what they meant. And we had a lot of Zoom meetings, Nayanjot, Lahiri, Krishna, me, and Kirti, to understand it. We had discussions. And my worry was these are all scholars and musicians, and I'm a theater person, and I'm quite a contemporary theater person. What do I do with them? How do I do them? And I remember I asking a question in one of the meetings, you mean, can we contemporize them? And the reply came, what do you think we expect from you? So thank you for that. And, you know, Kashmir is my birthplace. In 90s, I lost everything. I lost a lot of things. My relatives, friends, both Hindus and Muslim friends. I would hear news of them being killed, disappeared, and things like that. And one day I had got up a decision I had to go back. I can't live languishing my culture because of there are these bullets and hidden guns and very open guns. So I landed one day and started really from scratch. Nobody was singing in Kashmir in 2000. In weddings, there were never any singing Mehndi Raats and dances. That had all gone, it had vanished. I remember watching a bridegroom walking alone with his father to get married. And it was sad landscape, completely sad landscape. Nobody was dare take a perform. And the actors that you see are rural actors, they're folk actors, like Tamasha actors you have here. And they had been really, really brutalized because they were in the village and the terrorists would come and do anything with them. They will stay with them, they will have to feed them, they will do a lot of things. And I started gradually with a scratch working with them. And the first meeting I still remember when I went meeting them after many years, they had not performed for 10 years. Imagine a Nagaswaram player, a master Nagaswaram player. He has this instrument in his home and he cannot even breathe into it because he'll be killed or something will happen to him. And when I came there and they were all as if somebody had died when I met them, they cried. They are all elderly people crying, masters. Then we started working with them and I kept working. Now it is almost 2 decades. With them I started brick by brick building the confidence that we will somehow reclaim our cultural space. And we have succeeded in many ways, despite the fact there is violence, there is danger to your life. Many times, bullets crossing, you don't know how to save your life. Then comes this project. That is my memory of my birthplace. And I picked up 3 edicts only because we didn't have that much resources, and 3 edicts. This first edict is about the ruler talking about, Ashoka talking about that I have started various communities of religious communities to meet each other, encouraging to them, because there was a divide that time, like we have divide now. So in short, I'm telling you, then there is because scholar Nayanjot Lahiri will explain it much better than me. The second is about, he says in the critic that I need to know everything about my subjects, wherever I am. Even if I'm in a bedroom, garden, in the battlefield, I must have information about my subjects. Now the third is the edict, which we all know is the edict about his repentance after massacring 1 lakh people in Kalinga War, in 1 month people died naturally and millions became homeless, and his repentance. I flipped this coin to contemporary times. Otherwise there is no point for an artist to pick up any material which is from outside, ancient and just keep it in a museum. We cannot keep it in the museum. We are talking to people, people have to watch it. Now that is where I use these folk actors. There are 2-3 motives that you'll see in the play. One is the earthen matka, earthen pot. Earthen pot in Kashmir is very important in the sense if there was a drought, if there was floods, or there was a wildfires used to happen there, miles and miles of fire, the population will go to Dargah to ask for forgiveness, and they will carry this matka of the water to the. I've seen in my childhood thousands going and walking, and they will recite only 2 lines. Ya Sheikh Sana Ubur Karpana. You shake all these dark clouds, take them away from us. That motive is there. Then there's a motive of rituals. We have many rituals. Again, rituals over from when there is danger, there is death, or whatever is happening, which is not good. We will burn our old fire pots. That was one ritual that. Then there is the ritual of going to the dargahs where they will do a shab, all-night recitation of the Sufi poetry. Based on that, I deliberately did not. I had, subtitled the thing. But being a Kashmiri, you're so distant from that land. You only don't know what is happening there. You know very little happening there, or one shade of it. There are shades and shades and shades. I just wanted you to listen to some words, some songs, some sounds of Kashmir, and little landscape of Kashmir, which is not what you see in the tourist calendars. The calendar Dal Lake and Shalimar Gardens and other things. It's not there. It's pure rural landscape, dry landscape. We shot this film in winter. Yes, one thing, this is a film which I made complete, but Krishna is a very wonderful guy. He pushes you a bit, nudges you a bit. MK, this time let's do a little bit live to it. No, you can't say no to a person like him. So I've just come 3 days back from Kashmir, told these artists, now you have to do certain sequences live, and certain we'll show the film. So here it is. If there are any questions after that, we can talk about it. Thank you very much.
Ya Sheikh Sanna, 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 Ya Sheikh. Ya Sheikh Sanna,
Obur Pana,
Ya Sheikh Sanna,
Obur Pana,
Ya Sheikh Sanna,
Obur Pana.
Hata meşunu bana samujuan yatay galtı gosta.
Kailan kulu,
Zihanan tüy,
tagı tok dab.
hay Khuday. Joynis navas pe,
Vay Khuday, çayını barı gayma.
kot gaydim son friend.
Ot gaydım soy, Khuday.
Yimha aşısın, tekisın, çok kralayı.
Pagan,
Bakan toş manan.
Yaş manan.
Roziyeş mojimyon rovuyelo. Roziyeş
Miani Kodai, Karpanun Ram Tisai,
Pak.
Pak Magau Pandus Kodayas,
Sata.
Amun Turham, Pak, Yashak Sana,
Obur panna.
Yashak Sana,
Yaşak sanna.
Obur Pana,
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 Yaşak sanna.
Obur Pana.
Yaşak sanna.
Divam
Priya Rajan Parmo. Divam Priya Rajan Parmo. Daiveri Petiye Banyo Shaiki. Daiveri Petiye Banyo Shaiki. Mani Pat Pura Pat Banyo Shaiki. Mani Pat Pura Pat Banyo Shaiki. Anne blått åsuz bu sütü var ya. Anne blått åsuz bu sütü var ya.
Vayı batı yeliye bu
Sangas mantas. Vayı blått yelle bu sangas mantas.
Tanrı söz aymamaz pastı diye
As. Tanrı söz aymamaz pastı bey as.
Komutje basmanım pedavta öz.
Gombuji pasmanyam devata as.
Temama
Amukan mehelanas. Temama amukan mehelanas.
Magar men millantim avaması.
Magar men millanay avaması.
Karnayım millıklar kallıkansın.
Karnayım yıllıklar kallıkansın. Karnayım yıllıklar kallıkansın.
Tanrı söz hürmeti yası diye bas. Tanrı söz aymamaz yası diye bas.
Tolum hey kangar. Haya.
Yorum içe yapara. Yo. Tanrı söz aymamaz pastı diye az. Tanrı söz hürmeti
Bayınız
yası
as.
diye bas.
Kangar batı vaysal. Tolum hey kangar batı vaysal. Tolum hey kangar batı vaysal. Meşhur taran fikri. Yukor go go. What Reimagining. Tak etmiyoruz. Düşünüyor onu. Yumurtanga takibi. Tuna salah. Bakarta. Aram bırata. Ha?
Punyau, acau ak, doiau ză, treiau ză, cioriau cior. Punyau, jucatac, tac. Junum, te horror.
Hay! Basomut osmeyi şahar. खबर यथ कसन नजर लग
अकस रतस जागान बोय बोयस कत्ल करान
यम संसारुक यह मार मुंद शहर मगर आज
मोन रोजदार में नकब दिन जागान
आय मेन शहर तो बोज मोन फरियाद तो शुभ गमन मंज बलन आमुत मुसीबत किस यथ आवलनस मंज हेन आमुत बस अंदारत तो बे मगर राज
फुरहाई फाती कचई दुआ वाती नशुक मे चुन राज तो नशुस बह चोन गुलाम तम दोद गोर गई दोद कनित सो जमान हा बदले
दोपे हा ऊँट शी गमुत ऊँट अकल हज ना छन जदान
यपर मे वन कत गशक क्या छोकुस तो गशी क्या
बस
पानस राज वन वाले कड़ा डलमित ये ना चली वह कह अगर हा शोर कोरुत हटिस तल बड़ वह श्राह ना ओमुत ना जोमुत खेल खत्म
क्या
Ya Şef sana okur fana, 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 ya Şef sana okur fana.
Daisun tot राज प्रेम दर्शनन फरमो मे ब्रोह जगतस मज ओस न खलकस त राजस पानवन कह कथा बाथा आसा न ओस कह जरिए फरियाद करनुक तमे किन दुत मे आदेश कि बह बोज अवामक मसल पाने कुनि विजि तो कुनि जाय ये बह आस तती आराम गाहस मज सफरस मज बागस मज या रनिवासस मज ये बह आस तोती गछ वातन में अवामच खबर लुक हंद मसल बूजित आस बह तिम प्रथ विज प्रथ सात अंजरावान
Yetim horun. Hay afsus. Yetim horun. Yay pane te moed. Hay afsus. Hatam bor tasa. Hatavay. Hata क्या कोई चौसिया ये मुस्तरकारन करके जहाँ शुजन बातन Ashtrapati Trav Samasar Yeti Pan Heuta Dodmad Atranganım Kontesindora Memalınım Zan çok karışa Tasdeteti Trav Samasar Yeti Hot anın Hot garın kapıra malınım kıravını boş bıdiye travsamızar yetiye gayri karınım yeparım sayımdan mevalınım nargındamu soyvatiye travsamızar yetiye sayzalını trahi trahi ne yaparım sayan kotunu mayhediye Travsamızar yetiye Travsamızar yetiye
I'll now present to you the first set of edicts that we had worked with on Dhamma. It'll be followed by a conversation between Professor Nayanjot, Lahiri and myself, and then I will present the second set of edicts, which is about Ashoka and memory. Just restart the track. Yeah. Muni se जाए इच्छामि हकों क्योंकि मुनि से पजाममा अथा पजाए इच्छामि हकों क्योंकि मुनि से पजाममा अथा पजाए इच्छामि हकों क्योंकि सवे नहीं सुखे न हिदालोके का पालालोकिकायं मुनि से पजाममा अथा पजाए इच्छामि हकों क्योंकि सवे हित सुखेन हिदलोकिका पालालोकिकायं मुनि से पजाममा अथा पजाए इच्छामि हकों क्योंकि सवे नहीं सुखेन हिदालोकिका पालालोकिकायं मपानी सा सब पानी गरी गा सारी बागा मारी सनी सदा पमारी गामा पदानी नास्ति एदिशं दानं यादिशं धर्मदानं नास्ति एदिशं दानं यादिशं धर्मदानं नास्ति एदिशं दानं यादिशं धर्मदानं धर्म संस्तवो नास्ति एदिशं दानं यादिशं धर्मदानं धर्म संस्तवो धर्म संविभगो धर्म संबंधो नास्ति एदिशं दानं यादिशं धर्मदानं धर्म संस्तवो धर्म संविभगो धर्म संबंधो रि सदम पदम गरि ग नि सरि ग मरि ग पदा सबद सरित समवायो तसमवायो एव साधु तसमवायो एव साधु क्योंकि तसमवायो एव साधु क्योंकि धम्मं शृणारु तसमवायो एव साधु अधुना लधेषु अधुना लदेषु कलिंगेषु दिव्ये धर्मशीलन धर्म कामता धर्मानुषस्ति च अधुना लदेषु अधुना लदेषु कलिंगेषु दिव्ये धर्मशीलन धर्म कामता धर्मानुषस्ति च देवनपि असत् स्वस्ति अनुशोचना देवनपि असत् स्वस्ति अनुशोचना देवन प्रियस विजिनीति च कालिगानि देवन प्रियस स्वस्ति अनुशोचना देवन प्रियस विजिनीति च कालिगानि अधोपच अधुना लदेषु कलिंगेषु दिव्ये धर्मशीलन धर्म कामता धर्मानुषस्ति च देवनापि असत् देवनापि असत् देवनापि असत् स्वस्ति अनुशोचना देवन प्रियसत् विजिनीति च कालिगानि देवन प्रियसत् विजिनीति च कालिगानि देवन प्रियसत् विजिनीति च कालिगानि. Thank you. Can I now invite Professor Nayanjot Lahiri to join me here? This is fine. Anyway. First of all, thank you very much for joining us today here in Bombay. I want to first ask you the question about Kashmir and Ashoka, because we just saw a reimagined contextual rendition of the inner sensibilities of the edicts in a different context. So can I ask you that question first? Ashoka and Kashmir.
It's a pleasure to be here and to be talking to you again, T M Krishna, and to listen to you singing the words of Ashoka. Before I answer your question, I just thought, for the sake of the audience, I would mention a couple of things relating to the Edict project. The first is very early in the project, we decided that this is not exercise in hagiography. This is about an ancient emperor, a 3rd century BC emperor, with all his failings and his flaws, and of course, some unique ideas of both governing the state and governing the self. So what K Raina has done today so brilliantly is to actually showcase the ambiguities and what the cost of Kalinga would have been. It is one thing to talk about the remorse of Ashok, but to see what would have happened on the ground is, I think, something that is captured very well both in the theatrical performance and the film and in the guftagu that happened between them. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. The second thing which T M Krishna did not mention in his introduction, but I think it's worth pointing out, is, and I'm especially interested in it because having just published a book on the remembrance of Ashok from India to Thailand, and having looked at the different avatars of the emperor, I must say that this avatar of the emperor that Krishna has put in the public domain is singular. It is singular because I think for the first time ever, prose has been rendered into song. So this is, an experiment, and I do think at some point it would be good to hear you talking about whether this whole experience has elevated your music. On the question of Kashmir, I think there are 3 things to remember here. First, is there a historical connection between Ashok and Kashmir? Emperor Ashok put down his words in stone in many parts of the Indian subcontinent and beyond. So you'll find his edicts from Afghanistan to Andhra and from Kalsi in Uttarakhand to Kalinga in Odisha. But his words were not put down in stone in Kashmir. Of course, Ashokan edicts keep popping up all the time. So you never know, they may well turn up from Kashmir. The second point is that in the case of Ashok, he does mention other places. So it's not just where his words were put. So, for example, he mentions Tamralipti, which is Sri Lanka, and he talks about a king in Egypt. But again, Kashmir does not figure. So there isn't a historical connection. But in the remembrance of Ashok, Kashmir figures. And I'll just draw attention to 3 texts. So when you think about the Chinese pilgrims who came, Buddhist pilgrims who came to India, you always think of Xuanzang. And Xuanzang mentions Ashok as a king of Kashmir as well, and of course of many other places. And he mentions this incredible tale where Ashok was very upset with a set of monks who were schismatic. In his edicts, you will find him railing against Sangha Veda. And he threatens to drown them in the Ganga. At which point these monks, naturally, if the emperor is threatening them, they're just so frightened, they flee to Kashmir. At some point, Ashok repents, and he goes and he pleads with them that please come back. But I think Kashmir was much nicer than the Ganga plains, so they refuse to come back. And he then constructs 500 monasteries for them. In the 12th century chronicle of Kashmir, that is the Rajatarangini of Kalhan, again, Ashok figures and his successors as kings of Kashmir. And Ashok is mentioned not just as somebody who constructed Buddhist stupas, but he's also mentioned as a constructor of Shaiv shrines. He's mentioned as the founder of Srinagari or Srinagar. in the Rajatarangini. And then you have Abul Fazl's Aini Akbari, where again Ashok figures. So if there isn't a historical connection in terms of the words of the emperor, there certainly is a connection in terms of remembrance. And this then brings up the question of, should we be remembering Ashok in the context of Kashmir today? And you know, the Kalinga moment, as it were, I think resonates a great deal with the state of Kashmir and what is possible should, you know, the Indian state, if there's something to be learned from history, learn from the Kalinga moment of Ashok, because here is Ashok. And whichever way you look at it, a king expressing remorse for being victorious in a war in which, of course, there was collateral damage in terms of hundreds and thousands of people being killed and enslaved and so on, but who is accepting the blood, you know, of and the guilt, you know, that he carries with him, and making that gesture publicly that he is truly sorry for what has happened. I mean, would it make a difference if the Indian state actually and the people, you know, the government, if it reached out and made that kind of, you know, statement of remorse? I wonder. But there are reasons why there, at least for me, Kashmir and Ashok are connected in a variety of ways. But I want to ask you, Krishna, you got into Ashok fairly late in your musical career, and you began with Dhamma. Do you want to talk about what was it that drew you to Dhamma and to Ashok, and how what you remember of him is very different from what you're now doing with him?
Oh, I remember very little of him from school. Probably like many people here, it's that one paragraph in your civics, in your history textbook, or two paragraphs in your history textbook. And Ashoka before Kalinga, Ashoka after Kalinga, edicts. Job done. That is all I remember. But I think Dhamma was, actually the conversation towards Ashoka began with the ethics of life, of what it means, what does Dhamma mean, however you want to translate that word, both at a personal level and in terms of public action and public activity today, in terms of coexisting in what we call a nation. What is it? What does it compassion mean? What does love mean? What does care mean? What does justice mean? What does righteousness mean? A sense of ethics and morality, which Aruna Roy also spoke about yesterday. I think this was the struggle that, or internal debate that I was constantly having for a while. And it's at that point of time that I began reading the edicts again. And what was startling and beautiful about it is, here is, like you said, a king who at that time would be celebrating his victories and communicating to his praja about the victories, about how powerful he is and what he can do, what the charities he's done for people, etc., etc. But here is a person in a way conversing, of course conversing from a position of power, but still conversing and having this discussion about ethics of public life, ethics of his own life. And to me, that also having the ability to reimagine in a way Buddhism in a political context as a king was for me extremely beautiful. And that's how I first entered Dhamma or Dharma and Ashoka. And I think it is very important for me, at least personally, to engage with Ashoka, not in a sense of just historical positioning of something or somebody that happened, but in a way, we are all Ashokas, in a way, right? We all are in a position of different positions of power. We are all struggling with this contradiction of power and, within quotes, goodness, whatever that means. And we act in both ways, as Ashoka does. So I think that contestation, grappling, is what I think was very precious for me. And to sing him was completely a different thing altogether. To transfer that to music was completely a different thing. But I think that's what really brought me to Ashoka in that sense. But, and I know you and I have disagreed on this before, and I also bring Ambedkar in this conversation. And it was also a time I was reading a lot of Ambedkar. So maybe that's why I have those two names together. Very distinct people, very different worlds, different time periods, different social contexts. But I somehow felt the idea of bringing goodness or compassion and righteousness to a political framework, to a political framework, is taking the abstract and giving it something material. To me, there I found very interesting resonances of saying two people from very different social positions, again, reimagining the abstract, which is an experience and a feeling. In a way, even righteousness is a feeling. To actually materialize it in terms of a communication or in terms of the constitution, in terms of imbibing it with spirits that is important to us. To me, that entire interaction was very, very interesting. That's how, for me, Dhamma came in. But I want to ask you a question. I mean, your engagement with Ashoka as a historian is one, of course. But I know you have this, Ashoka is very personal to you in some manner. Can you explain why? Not as a historian.
So honestly speaking, I think, I've always enjoyed the company of cerebral men, and to find this cerebral man in antiquity, and that too a ruler, it was just amazing. So I just didn't I wanted to keep prolonging my association with him.
I can see this is a long love affair, but go ahead.
So first it was his words and rediscovering Ashok, because I've after all been a teacher of ancient India and continue to be. But to actually research and to grapple with his words, it's a different experience. And then after that, to go to the places where his words were inscribed, all the way from Nepal to Karnataka. And then, of course, my book, Ashoka in Ancient India, emerged out of that kind of field experience. Once that was over, I think within a year or so, I joined Ashoka University. And I then started missing him, I just liked being in his company. So I decided at that point, I pretended to myself that, look, this is going to be great value addition to Ashoka University if now I go in search of his remembrance. But that's what I told Ashoka, and they bought it immediately. So I then, with funds from Ashoka University, my faculty grant, I was allowed to use that. I traveled to Sri Lanka, and I traveled to Thailand and to Myanmar in search of Ashoka. And that's why, my second book is called In Search of Ashoka, Questing a Buddhist King from India to Thailand. So, yes, there is a personal... I like working on, people and phenomena who I respect and enjoy. I don't like working with a sneer. So, Ashoka is, great to be with.
I mean, I'm just going to shift gears here and talk about Ashoka and memory before we segue into the next singing. And here, I want you to talk about, here is a very unusual person. Usually kings always tell us, this was my father, this was my grandfather, I come from this legendary lineage. And here is a monarch who never refers to his lineage, who never talks about them. In fact, he talks about the past as being a worse place compared to the beautiful present that he's creating, right? I want you to talk about why he doesn't talk about his past and what we can learn from the way he juxtaposes the past and the present in his communication to his people.
So I think there are, 2 or 3 things that I'd like to point out here. The first is that I think he wants to make it out that he's a self-made emperor. So, if you are projecting yourself as, as marking a different kind of landmark in terms of, dynastic evolution. You won't talk about your father or your grandfather. But also, I think there's something personal there because Emperor Ashok was not meant to be emperor. He wasn't the eldest son of Bindusar, and I'm sure he killed off many of his brothers, before he captured the throne. And, so in that sense, he doesn't want to talk about it. On the question of juxtaposing what is it that he remembers and why does he remember that, he chooses to remember certain aspects in order to make his own reign appear to be a kind of threshold, moving into something that is very different. So, for example, you will begin now, I think, if I remember the sequence correctly, you'll begin with his first words. That is the Minor Rock Edicts. So he talks about the fact that earlier, so he's talking about the past state of his kingdom. He says earlier the gods and people did not mingle, and now because of his efforts they are mingling, which is a way of saying that he's made the land that he rules a more moral place. He also then talks about his immediate past, that just a few years ago he became a Buddhist. He wasn't zealous to begin with. He's now become zealous, and the zeal, the fruits of the zeal are there for all to see. So there is a past which is not great compared to the present that he is instrumental in bringing in. And this goes on. So I think one of the most moving and amazing parts of your rendition, will be when you talk about how the drums of war, Bheri Ghoso, has been replaced by the music of Dhamma Ghoso. And again, there is that kind of contrast. And if I was to put this somewhat cynically, I would say that this is something that all politicians do. Which is to say that, nothing ever happened before my time. But I think the difference between Emperor Ashok and our politicians today is that although the edicts are self-referential, so it is the I, or it is even in third person, it's Devanam Priya Priyadasi speaks thus. He also has an ego that is robust enough to say that, well, I've tried to spread my ideas through edicts and through persuasion. And he's put out a lot of edicts there. And he says it's persuasion which has, eventually worked. So somebody who's actually putting out all these diktats is saying that, look, so he's looking at his own life too. So memory functions at various levels with regard to Ashok. And I'm sure this is something you will showcase now.
I thought I would stop, but I do have one more question for you. The Indian state, since 1947, or even before that, invoked Ashoka a lot in a certain manner. That is a certain kind of remembrance and recall, a choice. And today you find another kind of invoking of Ashoka, a kind of saying that Ashoka was not this great king that the early Indian state tried to portray and invoke him through symbols, etc. But he was actually just a monarch and a horrible man, and there was no real transformation. So I want to just conclude by talking about, these are both forms of choices of remembrances. Can you just talk about these two remembrances, or the fluidity that has happened in between, and then we'll end.
So I think both have been problematic. So on the one hand, you have Nehru, who I think did see himself as a modern Ashok. And he named his daughter, Indira Priyadarshini, from Priyadarshan. And he at no point talks about the problematic Ashok. But you have to give Nehru the credit that he's invoking Ashok to actually create a new kind of inclusive state. And even in terms of his foreign policy, he's talking about soft power, which is first inaugurated by Ashok, right? So that's one kind of remembrance. And let me say this, that it is not just Nehru. Much before that, one of the imperial historians of British India, Vincent Smith, showed unmitigated admiration for Emperor Ashok. So there have been, there's a litany of scholars and statesmen, Rabindranath Tagore being another one, who have, invoked Ashok in this way. But there is a sense today that, first of all, India suffered because of a pacifist ruler, which isn't the case, because I don't think at any point the army was disbanded. Ashok himself is threatening his unconquered borderers and forest people. Even as he is invoking Kalinga, he's asking them to follow his example, but this is there. But I also think the fact that he's a Buddhist ruler, that must be rankling those who believe in a particular kind of majoritarianism, which is very powerful, and I think that is really the problem. It's not just should we remember Ashok, but can this remembrance even play a role? Because the poison that has come from the top has actually steeped, at all levels. So this idea of Ashok being weak and having weakened India, and he's a Buddhist, and Buddhism is effeminate and effete and so on and so forth, unlike a muscular Hinduism and so on and so forth. That has to do with present day agendas. It has very little to do with what is there in his words. So I think we are all waiting to hear you sing
Thank you very
again.
much, Nayanjot. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much. Can I get the stand back, please? Before I begin, I must tell you that this is a slightly more complicated piece to present. It has a lot of instruments, so we are going to play them, as they say, -1, which is recorded. It's the first time I was singing it live with that track, so all the best to all of you. And so I'd like to acknowledge the artists in the recording who are not present with us today. There's another vocal, which is by Sangeeta Shivakumar, voice. Violin is Sai Rakshit. We had N. Guru Prasad on the ghatam. And of course, Praveen has also played on the track. He's playing with me here today. And the track was recorded by Ritvik Raja. So I'm just acknowledging them because they are not present today. So, and you will hear the Kalinga Edict again come back in this rendition. Slightly different context, but it'll come back. Yeah, sure. David, just give us a minute. Can you give me the first Tanpura track, just the first Tanpura track for a minute? The track on, can we have the actual track both in the house and in my...
Devanam piye Devanam piye Anapayati Adhikani Adhatiyani Vasani Yahakansake Devanam piya Anapayati Adhikani Adatiyani Vasani Yahakansake No tuko badham Pakkante No tuko badham Pakkante Husam ekam Samvacharam Satireke tukho samvachare No tukho badham Pakkante Husam ekam Samvacharam Satireke tukho samvachare Yom maya sanghe upayite Yom maya Sanghe upayite Badham chame pakkante Yo maya Sanghe upayite Badham chame Badham chame pakkante Vihinsa
ಯಾದಿಸಾ ಬಹುಹಿ ವಸ್ಸಸತೇಹಿ ನಾಹುತ ಪುಲುವೆ ಯಾದಿಸಾ ಬಹುಹಿ ವಸ್ಸಸತೇಹಿ ನಾಹುತ ಪುಲುವೆ ತಾದಿಸೆ ಅಜಾಭಡಿತೆ ದೇವಾಣಂ ಪಿಯಸ ಪಿಯದಸಿನೆ ಲಾಜಿನೆ ಧಮ್ಮನುಸತಿಯೇ ತಾದಿಸೆ ಅಜಾವಡಿತೆ ದೇವಾಣಂ ಪಿಯಸ ಪಿಯದಸಿನೆ ಲಾಜಿನೆ ಧಮ್ಮನುಸತಿಯೇ ಅನಾಲಂಭೆ ಪಾಣಾನಂ ಅನಾಲಂಭೆ ಪಾಣಾನಂ ಅವಿಹಿಂಸಾ ಭೂತಾನಂ ನಾತಿಸು ಸಂಪಟಿಪತಿ ಅನಾಲಂಭೆ ಪಾಣಾನಂ ಅವಿಹಿಂಸಾ ಭೂತಾನಂ ನಾತಿಸು ಸಂಪಟಿಪತಿ ಬಂಭಣ ಸಮನಾನಂ ಸಂಪಟಿಪತಿ ಅನಾಲಂಭೆ ಪಾಣಾನಂ ಅವಿಹಿಂಸಾ ಭೂತಾನಂ ನಾತಿಸು ಸಂಪಟಿಪತಿ ಬಂಭಣ ಸಮನಾನಂ ಸಂಪಟಿಪತಿ ಮಾತಾ ಪಿತಿಸು ಸುಸುಸ ಮಾತಾ ಪಿತಿಸು ಸುಸುಸ ಮಾತಾ ಪಿತಿಸು ಸುಸುಸ
जनस्य अठकरोमि संवत्त च जनस्य अठकरोमि संवत्त च अठं जनस्य करोमि अहं संवत्त च अठं जनस्य करोमि अहम् सुजने अनुलूपाया धौव वढ़िया वढ़ेया किन सुजने अनुलूपाया धौव वढ़िया वढ़ेया किन सुख अभ्युन्नामयघौ धौ बढ़ियाति एतं देवानो प्रिय प्रियदसि लाजा हेवं आहा एतं देवानो प्रिय प्रियदसि लाजा हेवं आहा एसमे हुता एसमे हुता एसमे हुता सावनानि सावापयामि दौमानुसतिनि अनुससामि सावनानि सावापयामि धम्मानुसतिनि अनुससामि एतं जने सूतु अनुपटी पचि सति अभ्युन्नमि सति एतं जने सूतु अनुपटी पचि सति अभ्युन्नमि सति एतं जने धौ बढ़ियच बढ़ि सति बढ़ौ बढ़ि सति बढ़ौ बढ़ि सति आठवश अभिसित स देवन विगस विगदसि स रंयो कलिंग विजित आठवश अभिसित स देवन विगस विगदसि स रंयो कलिंग विजित हरिगणमाते प्रणसत सहस्रे एततो अपौढे हरिगणमाते प्रणसत सहस्रे एततो अपौढे सतसहस्रमिते तत्रहते बहुबहुतकेव मते सतसहस्रमिते तत्रहते बहुबहुतकेव मते ततोवाच अधुना लधेषु कलिङ्गेषु तीव्रे धौमशीलन धौमकामत धौमनुषस्ति च ततोवाच अधुना लधेषु कलिङ्गेषु तीव्रे धौमशीलन धौमकामत धौमनुषस्ति च देवनप्रियस स्वस्ति अनुशोचन देवनप्रियस sa ni da